Hello and welcome to Climb's podcast series Advancing Vietnam with me Vlad Savin as your host. Throughout the following episodes, we're looking to answering relevant questions about doing business in Vietnam. What are the opportunities and challenges faced by investors entering the market or existing players in major industries? We will seek to understand the business environment from a cultural, local mindset and how to deal with compliance from an international perspective. What are the major risks faced by businesses active in the region and how to overcome them? We will dive deep into the compliance environment in Vietnam, discussing processes and procedures, changes in laws, latest official updates from the authorities, and financial governance planning for businesses active in Vietnam. We at Acclaim consider compliance a major asset for foreign investors operating in Vietnam. We emphasize this aspect when speaking with our clients, and we make sure they understand the significant benefits of being compliant. In this episode, I'm discussing with Matthew Lowry, managing partner at Acclaim Vietnam, about the current challenges foreign individuals living and working in Vietnam are facing in regards to their immigration status, residency, and work permit issues. These matters have become more prevalent in the last few months due to the authorities focused on immigration and labor compliance for foreign individuals in Vietnam, creating a significant amount of distress and confusion within the expat community. Matthew, welcome to our 16th episode of Advancing Vietnam podcast series. Today's topic is highly relevant, not just for individuals living and working in Vietnam, but also for international businesses who employ or want to employ foreign workers. Lately, this has become quite a confusing and potentially problematic exercise for many, obviously enhanced by the latest Covid-19 developments in country.
Thanks, Vlad. I'm great to be here and look forward to discussing it. There's lots to talk about today.
Matthew, let's start first with what happened the last couple of months, which have been quite challenging for a large number of foreign individuals in Vietnam, particularly those on tourist and business visas. Before covering this subject, let's first clarify for our listeners the basics of immigration in Vietnam. What are the categories and options for immigration in Vietnam and potentially benefits for being a resident as well?
Okay, so let's look at a few different parts here because immigration is broad, yet we can bring it down to sort of the key factors. So to enter Vietnam, you must have a legitimate purpose, and the visa reflects that purpose. So there is tourist visas, which aren't being issued at the moment due to COVID. You've got business visas, and business visas are generally a short-term entry for a particular purpose with a business that is sponsoring you. You have employment, either temporary resident cards or employment visas, which require a work permit to activate. You have family visas, so if someone else has an employment visa, their spouses and children can have family visas. You have investor visas, if you are an investor, but keep in mind that not employment. This is just to enter the country, look after investment, not to actually undertake activities per se. You then have, so within that, you can have between employment and investment, you can have visas or temporary resident cards depending upon a whole range of factors. So they can be vice versa. And then you have, with respect to those who are married to Vietnamese, you can have residency based on that, or you're of Vietnamese origin. You can have either a temporary resident card or a visa exemption certificate. And the visa exemption certificate, just as an aside, is a 5-year document, but it's 6 months per maximum per visit because they're intended to allow you to come to Vietnam, spend time with family. They're not supposed to be used as a residence tool. So you've got a range. Now you've got a few other things. You've got visas in respect to NGOs. You've got visas theoretically to come to set up a rep office or a company, which very difficult in practice. You've got non-government, you've got a whole range of exemptions, but on the whole, you've got what I've talked about, which is still a broad range and a confusing range of visas and entry tools.
And what about tourist visas and business visas? How do these work in practice, and what is the historical intended use and practical purpose for these visas from a legal perspective?
So a tourist visa is a tool to come for tourist activities. There was changes to the laws. So if we look at the law changes from 1 July 2020, which were not really put into effect because of COVID, they were sort of almost ignored. But the premise of a tourist visa is that you can come to Vietnam on a 1-month tourist visa. You can extend that, but then you have to leave the country. And there's effectively a limited amount of time, 90 days, that you can be in country as a tourist. Which makes sense because if you're here for tourism activities, it's not here for long-term residency, it's not here for employment, etc. A business visa is probably a misnomer. There's various classes, not one business visa. So whether it's an investor visa, it is a sponsored visa for an expert or for a short term to deal with an issue, which can be up to 90 days, whether it is a employment visa. So you've got to look at what those classes are and what the rights are attaching to it. You can't just come and enter Vietnam on a business visa, as often has been assumed, and to do anything you want, because they're a sponsored visa. They're sponsored by an organisation to undertake activities. And so, and to convert those, by the way, to one of the issues has been, and I know we're going to talk about it, but I think it's important, is that people trying to change visas in country. So the law only allows you to change visa type to either, whether if you have a work permit, you can change your visa category in country. If you're an investor, so if you make an investment and satisfy the investor provisions, or if you're a family member of someone who meets those requirements. Other than that, you can't just change visa type in country. And that's an issue. And that's the big issue right now, is that people are being in country, wish to change visa type, and they're having a problem.
And speaking of that, there are many rumors circulating about the fact that the immigration authorities are denying visa extensions for foreign individuals in Vietnam. What are your thoughts on the current situation and what is happening with the status of these foreign individuals on tourist and business visas?
Yeah, so the issues we are seeing, and it's a big issue, there are a lot of expats leaving because they've been here either on many years, there's no retirement visa, there's no digital nomad, so there's many expats been here for a considerable amount of time because they like the lifestyle. And you had those who are COVID trapped or theoretically COVID trapped. I don't think there are realistically that many who cannot return to the home country now after this period of time. But the authorities, for those tourists, they are giving exemptions and extensions. But the exemptions, the free exemptions, are on the basis that you will leave. You can't convert that. You've been in breach if you're trying to convert and do something. But those trying to extend tourist visas, it's a short term. It's a day by day, month by month proposition, and we're not sure of when they'll cease doing that. And that's those who are trapped by COVID. That's the theory. Business visas, as I said before, the only way to convert to an employment or investor, which is to change your visa, is if you've got a work permit or you're an investor. The authorities are giving, some offices are giving 15-day extensions, some are allowing existing sponsor. But the biggest issue you're seeing is that if the authorities are looking and underlying, what have you been doing? Why haven't you had employment? Why haven't you been legal? There is a lot of people being told, here's an exit visa. And that exit visa is, we're not extending any longer. And we're finding that's a common approach for those who have been clearly just enjoying Vietnam but not following the spirit of the law. They have not been enforcing until just recently the new laws, and they haven't been requiring people to leave the country to change visa types. That is changing, and they're now just enforcing the law. That law's been in place for a while. They're just enforcing the law. So this is a sort of it's a whole range of issues that all come together at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the labor law and the labor code going forward a bit, the new labor code came into effect in 1 January 2021 and introduced a number of what appear to be more subtle changes to the previous laws applicable to foreign employees. However, the implementation of the Foreign Employment Matters through Decree 152 has resulted in significant implications and issues for foreign employees and their employers in Vietnam. Like, one of the first implications is the 4-year rule. Can you elaborate on what this means for individuals?
Yeah, so we're seeing that the storm of visa immigration matters, people going, well, I have to have a work permit now, I have to, because you can't be doing, with a few short exemptions, you can't be working in Vietnam at all without a work permit or an exemption certificate under labour laws. Immigration does not give employment rights. So employment laws cover it, but they work together. So now people are going, well, I've got to get myself organised, or expats who have been here for some time, looking to refresh every 2 years, you've got to refresh your work permit, and now coming up to these issues. So as you say, Decree 152, which was put in place effective 15th of February to enforce the new labour laws, which came into place January, so there was a slight gap, didn't on the surface introduce changes, but the Ministry of Labour's, so Melissa's enforcement of this has put a couple of very significant issues in place. So with those issues, that we are looking at both not accepting anything under the old decree, so that a work permit being applied under the new law is a brand new. It's a brand new issue. It's not a renewal. You can't rely upon any of the old documents. From a second perspective, you've got this having to prove your work experience outside of Vietnam. So you need to have 3 or 5 years experience in most roles in Vietnam, and you actually have to prove that. And you can't use your experience. So those who've been in Vietnam for a considerable period of time can't do that. The 4-year rule is a reversion back to something that happened in the past, whereby you could renew your work permit one time, and then you have to apply for a new work permit. And given they've got 2 years maximum, the argument is that you've given expatriates a 4-year employment cycle before they have to apply. The authorities have said there's no such thing as a 4-year, but we just need to make sure that expatriates are being employed for roles that Vietnamese can't be undertaken for, and therefore if you just have an indefinite usage right, how can you ever test that you can't have Vietnamese who can do the role? So those are the issues. Now, just on that, what it means is those individuals who are here and been here for some time, when their work permit comes up for renewal, if there's COVID restrictions and borders and in and out, trying to get documents, and Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, a lot of the consulates and embassies are closed, a lot of the Vietnamese government authorities, getting documents to satisfy those requirements prior to expiry is a big problem at the moment. And so there have been cases of people having to leave the country because they don't meet those requirements as they're being enforced.
And you mentioned before, but maybe we can clarify, can foreign individuals use their old work permit as proof for their working experience in Vietnam when they apply for a new work permit issuance? As it used to be the case like that, and now apparently things are changed.
Yeah, so at the moment, the Melissa's approach and their direction to each of the departments in the provinces that issue the work permits is that you can't rely upon domestic experience, which goes against what it was. Before it was, once you applied for work permit, you had to have evidence. Then you could just use the work permit as additional proof that you had experience in that role. The current interpretation ignores that and says it must be experienced outside of Vietnam. That is not the law. That's the current interpretation. There's been petitions made to the ministry to reverse that and to be able to rely upon legal and valid in-country experience, because a lot of the time as roles evolve, the experience is obtained in Vietnam, and the expertise of the experts is something that has been created in Vietnam and that is necessary and useful, and not being able to use that does remove the skill set that is to Vietnam's advantage.
And under the previous decree, work permits could be renewed, as you said, under a simplified process. However, Decree 152 takes out this important provision and states that work permits can only be renewed once, hence the 4-year rule. How does this impact the foreign labor workforce, and why do you think the authorities have adopted such a measure?
I don't think ultimately have a big issue. It's conceptually an argument of, do you only want to see it for 4 years? That was something that some of the business groups have raised with the ministry. I don't think that's necessarily the approach. I think the bigger implication is that they are not accepting anything done under the previous decrees and laws. Therefore, everything's new application. So everyone's starting a new 4-year period. That 4-year period is going to be a new application just like it is now. So I don't think that's going to change. And the authorities keep saying that there is no 4-year life. The law and the 4-year provision is there to make sure that the labour law's concept of foreign employees as experts and managers are here because Vietnam doesn't have the skills. It's not a lifelong appointment, and there needs to be process for that. So it's a fresh application. The application is an issue now. If they clarify and clear the application process so you can use in-country experience, I think the 4-year thing is just going to be less of an issue. So that's my take on that.
Is there any good news, though, covered in the new Decree 152 and the labor law for foreign individuals living and working in Vietnam?
If you're married to a Vietnamese, yes, that's probably the only one. So there is an exemption process. It's people, I've heard a lot of miscommunication. So there still must be a need for a foreign individual to work in a role, but that individual does not need to lodge a work permit application. They just lodge notification to the authorities, and the authorities within 3 days will accept and stamp the notification that a foreign individual is being employed who is exempt by virtue of marriage. And it's quite a simple process, which is quite unusual for Vietnam. You often see convoluted processes. One point to note that there are certain industries where the ministry in charge of that industry puts additional requirements on individuals for roles, and they may need to still meet those requirements. So they may have a certain certification or a degree or qualification to undertake it. Even though they're exempt from a work permit, the other from a Ministry of Labour, the other ministry may not exempt them simply because they're a work permit exempt. They may not be exempt from satisfying the requirements. And that's something we haven't seen a lot of in there, but we're starting to see a bit of buzz around of that is coming into play. Certain professions that may apply for.
Mm-hmm. There is significant pressure being applied to the authorities from foreign business chambers and organizations, Eurocham being one of them, AmCham, Australian Chamber, and so on. And hopefully we see positive changes in the near future regarding the work permit compliance and approval process. Are you aware of any developments in this area?
I'm aware of the petitions, I'm aware of the discussions. I was on a call 2 days ago going through a lot of the issues that are being presented. At this stage, there's no movement. My personal opinion is that whilst a lot of these visa situations are being sorted out, the ministry is not going to budge much. I think they're just trying to take this hard process of cleaning up and enforcing the laws, immigration, and making work permit one element of that. So I think they're trying to clean up together with Vietnam's vaccine rollout for COVID. I think this is sort of the perfect storm of all these things happening at once. My guess is, and it's purely opinion and guess, is that we'll see a relaxation and reversion on some of those things later in the year, but not until there's been this cleanup of those who are here illegally using business visas for employment, cleaning up the workforce, and making sure that, so we've got compliance from an immigration perspective, a compliance from a labour perspective, and then we'll go back to a much more focused process because we don't have the legacy and history of lesser compliance in those sectors.
And closing now with a question relevant to the beginning of our conversation, what would be your advice at this stage for foreign individuals living in Vietnam regarding their residency, visa, work permit, and immigration issues? What should they do?
It depends on the situation, but what I would be doing is planning well in advance. It's not in the past 30 days before your work permit expiry, you just get it sorted out and you know what would happen. Now we're looking 6 months in advance. So if your work permit's expiring within the next 6 months, act now. It will take a long time to get the documents because you'll have to get them from abroad in most cases and go through a process. So don't assume that what you've done in the past will work again because of the current interpretation. So 6 months is my first rule, and then it should work itself out. If you're married, get your temporary resident card, make sure you've got residence and documents and you can get exemptions for most cases. And to also, if you're an investor, check your investor status because they've changed the investor visa rules whereby they were giving TRCs, 3-year TRCs if you had an investment. Now it's a minimum requirement of $130,000. So when you go to reapply, you may not meet the exemption category for work permits or the TRC categories. You might go into a 3-month business visa as an investor visa with no work rights. So you need to, if anything's expiring for the next 6 months, act on that now. 6 months is the minimum time period to sort this situation out at the moment, unfortunately.
Matthew, thank you again for your practical insights, and I do hope that our listeners manage to get a better understanding on what's currently happening with the work permits and immigration issues.
Thanks, great to talk as always.
Foreign individuals living and working in Vietnam are advised to ensure they are aware of current regulations on residency, visas, and work permits so that they can make informed and efficient choices if they seek to continue staying and working in Vietnam legally and in a compliant manner. We also advise corporations employing or seeking to employ foreign individuals to stay abreast with the latest updates regarding foreign employment and work permits, which can be found on our website and social media channels under guides, client alerts, insights, or other resources. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And many thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in to Advancing Vietnam podcast series. For more information about this topic, please check out our publications on vietnam.acclaim.com. And if you want to reach out to us for any additional details, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or throughout the website contact details.